Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the NDIS Circle. Today we're joined by April Eyre, Support Coordination Manager at Network Case Management Services. April is a dedicated professional with over 15 years in the disability and community support sector, with extensive experience in coordination, complex care and leadership. April has worked across roles like Specialist Support Coordinator, Program Manager. We even were talking offline about a mutual organisation we worked with before, so heaps of experience there. And April is passionate about empowering people with disabilities to lead lives of independence and choice. Today's discussion, we're going to talk about managing burnout, which is something that's really top of mind in the support coordination space specifically, but the whole of the NDIS, and bringing back fostering pride in our NDIS roles, particularly in that sort of backdrop of some media stigmatism of the NDIS and some providers doing the wrong things, and how we can restore pride in what we do and return back to those values, as well as a powerful impact we can make in our communities. April brings a wealth of experience, and today we'll hear her thoughts on changing the narrative around the NDIS, embracing our impact and finding meaning in our daily work. Oh, that was a mouthful. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks, thanks, April. Thanks for joining us.
It's lovely to be invited on.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. Maybe we can frame the conversation by you telling us a little bit about yourself and what drew you to work in the disability sector.
Well, I think like a lot of people that come into the sector, you hear a lot that the sector kind of finds you, and you kind of get drawn into this sort of work, probably because it connects with, something you're really passionate about. And I can give a lot of credit to a close family member, my cousin Kate, who I grew up with, really similar in age, absolute pocket rocket, hilarious lady. She lives with a disability, and I grew up just seeing how much of a profound impact her support workers, her LAC as it was called back then, just all the support that her family received. I was really inspired by that and kind of knew that that was something I wanted to be a part of growing up. And I also am just, I'm a real big empath, and I get very, passionate about social inclusion, and particularly growing up in a high school, just noticing and kind of feeling really passionate when someone was excluded from something. I had a real kind of issue with it. And so I suppose I was drawn to kind of that social inclusion and social justice element of it as well.
Yeah, awesome. And tell us about where you're working at the moment. You're working at Network Case Management. You're a manager there. What does a typical day look like for you at the moment?
So I'm working with Network Case Management, and I'm proud to say Network's been around and leading in the disability sector for over 25 years, celebrated an anniversary last year, which is fantastic. Network was started by a very passionate social worker who wanted to support people with brain injury, rehabilitating back to the community. So we all are really passionate about carrying on that legacy. My role specifically is supporting the support coordination and case management team. And my days are very varied. Kind of have to roll with the punches some days. They can be a little bit unpredictable.
Yeah, know the feeling.
Having said that, my day is often getting to support and work alongside a really incredible team of specialist support coordinators, helping them feel on the front foot of all the changes in the NDIS and our NDIS kind of knowledge base, and making sure that I'm feeding through all the updates and we're keeping our tools really sharp in terms of NDIS changes.
Yeah, awesome.
I also get to work with my own group of specialist support coordination participants, and so I've been able to keep a really front-facing role with families and participants and kind of keep that connection to the front line, which I love.
Yeah, so you still retain a small caseload of people that you're supporting while you manage the team? Yeah, how do you go with balancing that? I have a similar experience, yeah.
So it's something that our directors, Brett and Davinia, are really passionate about. They still hold caseloads themselves. I think it gives us, a first-hand perspective for our team on the challenges and navigating any kind of barriers or obstacles and staying relevant. You have to actually do to know what you're talking about and support a team doing those things. So it can be a balance at times. Our participants' needs, we try to keep absolute priority around what they need and getting those things done. But obviously I'm really passionate about making sure I stay responsive to my team when they need a debrief, or if they, want to work collaboratively on a situation for a participant. I do actually get the opportunity to meet lots of my team's participants and step in and help wherever needed, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Yeah, it's amazing. Obviously, Network being around for 25 years, just a testament to the quality of the work that the organization's done over such a long period of time. So, yeah, congratulations. When I put the call out on LinkedIn for my next podcast guest, you responded and you sort of spoke about this restoring pride in roles as NDIS professionals. What made you say that? And what are some of the unique contributions that you think that NDIS professionals are making that perhaps are going unrecognised? Talk to us a bit about what you meant there.
Well, I think that there has been a noticeable change in the attitudes of the community, or perhaps people that aren't as directly involved with, people with a disability or disability supports. I think there's a bit of an impact from the media highlighting some of the challenges with NDIS, some of things like fraud, or the cost of the NDIS, of course, is a huge concern for anyone that lives in the community and pays taxes and understands the broader impact. But the interesting thing is that when people are working really successfully and passionately and making sure that the participants are living their lives independently and safely, the work that we do is actually really quiet and it isn't obvious. So I think when we're doing a really good job, we're almost working in a really subtle way to make sure the participant doesn't necessarily look surrounded in support or surrounded by professionals. I think that's a bit of a catch-22 because there's so much great work going on, by allied health professionals, support workers. There's so much going on in the community that the general public probably can't even visually see.
Yeah, I mean, reading those headlines as someone working in the NDIS that we were talking offline, even saying to family or friends or people in the community what you do, you say, I work in the NDIS, it almost feels like there's that this little thing sitting under it. People are reading all about the cost of the NDIS and dodgy providers, and as a provider providing ethical support and who got into the sector for the right reason to support people with disability, can be a bit disheartening. Yeah, have you noticed that in your team as well? If people express that?
Having been around and working mostly for not-for-profits or, in kind of a charitable space where a lot of what we did was either block funded or we would fundraise for it, back then the response from the community used to be, oh, wow, aren't you amazing? And look, nobody is here working for pats on the back, or I actually think people with a disability shouldn't have to wait for charity to have the essential supports they need. However, the narrative or the kind of attitudes seem to have gone from, oh, wow, that's amazing, good on you for working passionately in that space, to, oh, are you in it for the money, which is really disheartening for, the people that are genuinely ethical, passionate and working so hard in the space.
Yeah, totally. So how do you think we can change that public perception? Is it just, being a little bit more public in the work that we do and sharing success stories? How do we start to sort of change that narrative?
I think it's really hard when factors like politics and elections and all of these things come into it, because I think there's been an opportunity for the NDIS and the media to really hold on to that concept of fixing the broken NDIS, whereas if you actually look at the NDIS's social media, there are a lot of really wonderful highlighted stories. I think it's similar to media in general. The wonderful good news stories, they don't attract as much attention. But I think for my team, when they've raised, the struggles with, perhaps a family member asking, what is this NDIS about? Is this, are there scams, or, are you doing ethical work? I think it's really important not to feel that we have to justify ourselves, but perhaps to offer, a positive perspective on what you actually do day to day, or a great positive outcome, or some great ethical work, if you want to. I love the opportunity to kind of provide the flip side of the story.
Yeah. And that's a good point you make about media. Perhaps it's not an NDIS specific issue. It might be, I think it's even reflecting, I think the US election is today, and sort of the vitriol and almost almost feels religious, doesn't it? The Republicans versus Democrats.
It does.
Media is so sensationalist. Negative headlines get the most clicks, clickbait. Maybe NDIS is just the thing that's sort of top of mind at the moment, and it's a reflection on media in general. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Absolutely. I think that disability services were not so publicly discussed. It wasn't a big piece of the conversation in terms of political discussions, and the federal government is now facilitating the NDIS, or administering it, so to speak. But when it was state-based, those conversations, I don't feel like they were as widespread or as sensationalized in the media, or as I guess interlinked with political conversations. Maybe
Yeah.
not so broadly. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And before we came online, you were sharing that you recently had a chat to your team about self-care, managing burnout. I've had Mia on before, who's the freedom therapist who started her own business, sort of managing burnout for therapists. So it's something that's not just specific to
Awesome.
case managers and support coordinators. What did you share with your team in that talk?
Well, they're really collaborative and they bring a lot of expertise in general, but I think there's some fairly simple and key things that we can do. It's about understanding your own signs of burnout and having a bit of reflection on what you start to notice in yourself if you're starting to be affected by the workload, or perhaps some of the difficult things that we're supporting participants with. It's very easy to take that on board or become quite down about some of the things we're supporting with. I think working with a great supervisor, whether that's in-house in your business or working with a clinical supervisor outside of your workspace, is really important to help, I guess, hold you accountable to some degree to prioritizing your own well-being, your own mental health, and also keeping a check on signs that you might be experiencing some burnout. So I know for me, I become a little bit less socially excited and less socially active, and tend to be a little bit of a recluse when I'm feeling really burnt out. So I know that's, a simple thing that I can watch for. I think for me as well, and for my team, a lot of people shared that the sense of connection and collaboration with other professionals or other people working in a similar space, fostering a good sense of connection in the industry, is really important too. So our group supervisions and our group professional development days are a great way to kind of share the experiences and challenges and feel less alone in it, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the sector's gotten so much bigger, isn't it? Like, obviously, you worked in the old days pre NDIS, like I did briefly, and the sector felt really small then. Like everyone knew each
Yeah,
other. It was this sense of
yeah,
collegiate collaboration. I think WA, maybe compared to other states in Australia, has maybe kept that a little bit more because we had such a strong disability
so
sector beforehand. But it has gotten so
yeah.
much bigger. There's so many more participants, people with disability that are
Mm.
receiving support. There's so many more providers that just as things get bigger, just like an organization, I guess, that it becomes a little bit more impersonal. You don't know everyone, and maybe that can lead to some isolation, especially with a lot of sole traders and smaller organizations
Definitely. Yeah.
working,
Look, I
whereas
think
previously it was bigger.
sorry, Dan, I would agree with that, but I
Mm.
think that with the NDIS and people having so much more opportunity to have so many varieties of service providers involved with their support, I think there is an opportunity to really connect with each other. And maybe, I tell my team, if you don't have the in-house resources to address an issue, then the next step is to look across the pond and see who else might be able to help out and work collaboratively. So I think the resources that we have in each other now have really improved. Things felt very, I guess, siloed before when we were working for organizations where pretty much everything you had access to for that person all had to be in-house with your organization. So I've really enjoyed being able to cast the net really wide for my participant, create some really bespoke multidisciplinary teams or support teams around.
Yeah, that's really true. That's really true. I like that.
them.
And I like what you said previously about recognizing your own signs of burnout as well, because everyone looks different. For some people, it can be working harder. For some people, it can be avoiding work. I know for me, it's maybe I become a little bit irritable. I withdraw a little bit,
Yeah,
maybe a little bit similar to yourself, but everyone's got their own signs, and you need to sort of have the
definitely.
self-reflection to know what that is and then sort of respond to it. You're also speaking about in supporting people in this space where there's a lot out of our control. Like I recently went through a plan
Mm,
reassessment. We gathered all this strong evidence, wrote a massive report, felt like we've just done everything we could for this man with
yeah,
Parkinson's, going through his plan reassessment report, Section 100 internal review request, and it came back and we didn't get the result that we wanted. So when those sorts of things happen, it's quite disheartening because that's out of your
definitely.
control. So yeah, talk to us about like
Mm,
that internal locus of control and how can we
yeah.
sort of
So
focus on that?
I love that you've actually tapped into that because that's one of the, I guess, models that we looked at. And I know that other people, leading in the sector or working in this kind of space love the circles of control model. I don't, and it's probably widely known. But I think for my team, we had a bit of a refresh on that because, as you said, you can put your all into every resource, every absolute, rock you can have turned over to find the evidence or to justify the vital supports needed. And not only is it disappointing for the participant, but it's really disheartening. So I think it's really important that we reflect on how much we can completely control within our role and what we do, and how much we can have influence over, and then some of the things that are actually outside what we can control. And it's certainly not a matter of just rolling over and accepting what we can't control, but it's about reflecting on, could I have done more? Have I done everything? Have I given it all? And I think in most cases, an ethical SC who's passionate about what they do, who knows what they do well, in those cases, they will be able to say absolutely yes. And then we just look at the next steps. But I think it's really important that we don't see those outcomes or, those challenges as a personal failure or a professional failure, because there's so much in the NDIS space that's really not fully in our control or in our control at all, sadly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, like just pulling on that thread of that situation when that decision came back, I started to feel guilty, like I'd done something wrong, and I went, just hold up, you've done everything that you could. Don't take on the blame and the guilt, the professional guilt of a decision that was out of your hands. So I think it's just a good reminder for all of us, especially as support coordinators. You can become the meat in the sandwich, if you like. That's how I like to explain it, with the participant and the family and the NDIA. And it can be a challenging space to be sometimes. Amazing when things go right, you get all the credit. And then when things go wrong, you get maybe the opposite.
And often we're the one, I guess, delivering that bad news and being the messenger of the outcome of the new plan or, the S100 or whatever it might be. And we are, we're seeing that first frustration, and we're potentially copying that feedback that it's probably more directed at the agency and that frustration. But, it's a hard and challenging part of what we do, having to deliver that news and then receive that feedback or frustration and manage that. But I mean, there's so many little wins and successes along the way. It's always going to be an element of what we do, I think. I completely understand though, and it's totally natural after putting so much effort into something to feel disappointed, to feel frustrated, and it's perfectly okay to acknowledge and feel validated in that as well. Like I would be lying if I've said I actually haven't had a few quiet tears to myself after a poor outcome of something that we put everything into. So I think it's okay to just let yourself feel it as well without blaming anyone or yourself.
Absolutely. Feeling that means that you have compassion, which is a great trait for what we do. So it's an essential trait for what we do.
I think I'd be more concerned if my team were kind of looking at a really disappointing outcome and feeling apathetic about it. I'd actually be wanting to kind of explore that and be more concerned about, the apathy there, because essentially I know that, I'm working with a team that really cares about people with a disability getting the things they need to live a normal life. So it's normal to feel frustrated if things don't go how we want, or if we have to go back to the drawing board again.
Yeah, and perhaps that apathy or could be a sign of burnout for someone. They're just not able to feel the emotion anymore. So, okay. And you mentioned the success stories briefly. Do any sort of spring to mind that you supported through network or in prior roles? Any sort of success stories and that you personally had a role in? Yeah, what springs to mind?
Oh, look, I probably these days am more involved in seeing my team's successes, which makes me incredibly happy and proud to be a part of. My personal successes, I think working with somebody for a long time, I tend to have a bit of an affinity for working with people with intellectual disability, where they're quite day-to-day, their function is very good, but their intellectual disability might make them socially vulnerable. And so working in the space of creating some safety and capacity building around people that are vulnerable to exploitation or vulnerable to kind of social exploitation, I suppose. A lady I worked with years ago, I was quite a new support coordinator at the time. She was living, with somebody who was a sexual offender and, perpetrating not so nice crimes. And her whole living situation was sort of controlled by that person. She was incredibly socially vulnerable, but we had to take a really gentle approach because ultimately we didn't want to traumatize her any further. We didn't want to force her in her decision making, but we had to create safety and we had to help her understand, her own rights and safeguard herself and find some independence away from that person that was taking advantage of her. And what we managed to build around her was a team of, positive behaviour support practitioner, OT, mental health OT, psychologist, a beautiful team that she feels she can be honest and transparent with, that have worked on psychoeducation and helping her understand her own safety, her own boundaries. And gently over 3 to 4 years, she's made massive leaps. She's acquired her own accommodation away from that person. She's put safe boundaries in place from that person. She understands what it means to be taken advantage of or exploited in terms of finances, sexually, psychologically. She's made massive steps forward. We're not in a perfect place, but I am so incredibly proud of the journey and the work that she has put in, and kind of the services around her and the impact that they've had on her over the last few years. Her life looks so different. And so there's moments like that I can reflect on and go, every day might not feel like a big win, but if we look back over, 3 years and what services she's had access to over the last 3 years and how much they've impacted her safety, her life, her independence, I'm really proud of that work.
Oh, that's an amazing story. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's super inspiring, and you got to take the long-term view, don't you? These things aren't achieved overnight. So over a couple of years is, that's amazing to see that progression. Sometimes it can't feel like a lot day to day, and then, as you said, you look back a year or 2 years or 3 years and you go, wow, I really have come a long way.
There were definitely moments along the way where we had to address immediate risks and make immediate changes that day, that week. But overall, I feel like we did a great job of ensuring that she still had the say in what happens in her life day to day, and no one forced things, or that the steps forward she's taken have genuinely been her steps and her choice.
Yeah, awesome. And for your team that you're managing and you're supporting, what are some of the things that you do to build a positive culture within them? Obviously, you do some training, regular catch-ups. How do you foster that?
I think we try to kind of go with the flow as to what's working for us and what's needed at the time. So like last year, we had a bit of a check-in point. We were feeling like people were a little bit disconnected. We actually created some online lunchtime catch-ups with, just like a check-in once a week where we would share lunch over Teams, do a couple of quiz questions. We also have our organisation is wonderful in offering not only supervision with me, which they do once a month, but also peer supervision that they can access. So if there's a particular team member that they want to do a peer supervision with and kind of be reflective on their case practice, they can access that as well. And we also just really like to have a good time. So I don't know if it's well known or not, but our director, Brett, is an absolute party animal sometimes. Or is a really good party, should I say. And
is he listening to this? Is he going to listen to this?
Not at the moment, so I'm probably going to get in trouble later. But he and his wife, Davinia, throw an amazing party. So a couple of times a year, we really do get together and celebrate the achievements of the team and the organisation. And I honestly think that that's a really big refresh,
Yeah, I want an invite to the next one. Please pass that on. Love that. Okay. And
definitely a perk.
yeah, that's awesome. That's great. In terms of those misconceptions, sort of returning to our earlier theme about the NDIS sector, what misconceptions do you think people might have about people working in the NDIS sector? And how can we sort of handle those conversations? How can we combat those stereotypes?
It's really tricky because I'm torn between sort of saying, look, we don't have to justify our position and what we do, and we know that we can hold our heads high as ethical service providers. But at the same time, if there's an opportunity to I guess increase someone's awareness on what you do for a job or what supports are accessed through the NDIS that are really crucial and really vital, you can have those conversations. I love talking about my work. I'm just such a bit of an NDIS nerd. So my friends probably get too much information as far as the great things we've achieved that week or something really cool that a participant's managed to achieve. I just really think that promoting the positive within the NDIS, either online, in our social media, in our networking, I just think highlighting the successes and the positive work is really, really important, because it gives us all a chance to reflect on the great stuff that other people are doing, share what we're doing. So I think connecting with each other and highlighting our achievements is really, really important, and reflecting on those.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that's great. I think there's several environments in the media where there's that emphasis on negativity. So really got to make a concerted effort to create those positive spaces and environments. Awesome. Thanks for coming on and having a conversation. I think a lot of NDIS professionals and providers in particular will get a lot of value out of that in their day-to-day work. Yeah. People want to connect with you, obviously you're on LinkedIn, Network Case Management, just Google them, check out the website. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next week for the NDIS Circle. Bye for now.